Hello, folks. Welcome to the podcast. If you have ever been curious about near-death experiences and how they can completely change your life in terms of attitude, beliefs, direction in life, this show is for you. I want you to meet my friend, Dr. Lotte Valentin. And Dr. Lotte is from Arizona, and she's an interesting lady. She's an author and a naturopathic doctor, and she's had not just one, but two near-death experiences. And she's here to tell us all about what how that changed her and where she's going with it. And it's an interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, friends. Welcome to season 2 of the Broken Open podcast. I'm Maureen Towns, author, speaker, and expert on finding calm amidst the chaos of helping those you love with mental health and addictions issues. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please be sure to subscribe so that you're the first to know when new episodes are released. And visit MaureenTowns.com to get in touch, to stay current on our programs, Footsteps for Families and Freedom from Intergenerational Trauma, as well as any updates on the book, Broken Open. Enjoy the show. Hello, Dr. Lotte. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. It's an
All
honor.
the way from the beautiful weather in Arizona.
Yep, it's nice and warm actually. It's just so nice. This time of the year, it's like 70s and sunny. I'm so sorry that you guys are freezing up there.
We're freezing to death here.
It's really nice, right? This is why we live in Arizona, but don't talk to us in the summer because it's just awfully hot. Like you can't even go outside. So
yeah,
it's like 120, in the shade.
Yeah. Well, this is your time of year then.
Yeah, so it's nice.
So you have an interesting background, and I've heard you on other podcasts telling your story. I'm going to. Can you summarize for us a little bit? Because I know it's a long story, but can you summarize for us your background before I ask you the broken open question?
Summarize my background. Okay, so I was born and raised in Sweden, in Scandinavia.
Yep.
Which is a socialistic country. You have free school lunches and free healthcare in schools.
Yeah.
But it has the economy is like a United States economy.
Okay.
And then when I was 21, I moved to the United States. I transferred from Stockholm University to Boston University. And I got married to an American. Mm-hmm. And then I worked for IBM as a programmer and systems analyst in New York. Mm-hmm. And then after having one child, after going back to work and work for a while, I stayed home and then had 2 more children. Mm-hmm. Now, I ended up in computer science because I'm like very logical and very structured. I did not believe in anything. I was a complete atheist. Yeah. If you can't touch it, feel it, smell it, and hear it, as far as I was concerned, it did not exist. Right. I did not have any religious beliefs at all. And just literally a complete atheist. When you die, it's dark, that's it, you're gone. Like you stamp on a fly and that's it. Mm. And after my 3rd child was born, I hemorrhaged basically to death in the emergency room. I hemorrhaged, went to the ER, was sent home, then saw the doctor. They didn't do anything. This is in 1992. Mm-hmm. I hemorrhaged again, so back in the ER, and the blood clots were the size of a baby's head. They were just ginormous blood clots. And the 5th time I hemorrhaged, luckily I was in the ER. I had what's called a near-death experience, and that is when you're either dead and you leave your body, or you're very, very close to death and you leave your body. Mm. So I had a near-death experience, went to the other side, and realized that there was just unconditional love and peace, and you had the access to time. There was no time on the other side. And then was sucked back into my body like a giant vacuum cleaner. Yeah. And then I was really sick. I got really sick. I started getting bruises like 9 months later, and went to the doctor, and this went on for quite some time. And later on, we figured out that I had a bone marrow suppression, but I was really, really sick. And after I had the near-death experience, now I don't know if it's because of the near-death experience or being so sick, but it was as if my soul was never back in my body. It just kept trying to leave. I was just so sick and just felt like I was going to pass out. I couldn't go to the grocery store without putting my head down. People would come up to me in the store and say, "Are you feeling okay? You look like you're going to pass out."
Yeah.
And in my head, I would be, "Oh, I got like 30 more seconds before I'm, gonna like things start turning black." I was just existing in that kind of environment. I was just constantly feeling like my soul was going to take off and leave. So then I had a second near-death experience 2 years into my daughter, my third child being 2. And I just left in the middle of the night, and I went to this place that I call the mid station, because it was as if there were levels below me and levels above me. But then I heard the most beautiful music, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And I look around, though I don't have a body. I'm just looking around, and I see a little log cabin. So I open the door and I look inside, and I'm thinking the music is coming from there, but there's nothing there. And then I turn to the other side, there's another log cabin. And it's just fascinating. Like, why did I see log cabins? But everybody sees different things. And some people will meet their ancestors, their parents, their grandparents. No, this is enough. Some people would see beautiful fields and flowers and mountains. I saw log cabins. And I opened the other door, and the music, there was nothing in there either. But then I become aware of this very, very bright white light. And it is the brightest, whitest light. I can't even describe it. Like, I've tried to find images on the internet that looks like this. If you took a picture of the sun, straight into the sun, but it's even brighter than that. It is the brightest, whitest light ever. But from this light, the music came from the light. But there were angels that were singing, that made the music. But I didn't believe in any of it. I didn't believe in angels. I didn't believe in God. I had no religious beliefs whatsoever, even though I had left my body once in the ER, but I didn't leave the ER. I was in the room of the ER when I left my body. And now I'm traveled like all the way to some other side, which is probably right next to us. But then when I'm in the light, it is the realization that we are light. We come from this light. It is like the divine source. And it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it whatever you want, because these are terms that we made up here on earth to call the divine source something, God, or if you have another God, right? Doesn't really matter what it is. But then I became aware of 2 like spirit guides. And there was one on my right and one diagonally to the left of me, in front of me. But then the one on my right was talking to the other spirit guide, and he said, "What is she doing here? She can't be here." And I'm like, no. Like, I'm not going back. Like, how does this work? How can I be outside my body and still be me? Right? Because I didn't have any belief that there was any kind of soul or spirit or anything. It's just your body. If the body dies, that's it. You're gone. But here I am. I'm existing in some other state without my body, right? And so I'm like, how does this work? How can this be? And the spirit guide to my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't believe, you wouldn't like remember it later on. And I've heard other people talk about this now later, just in the last few years that I've gotten more involved with organizations and heard many other stories, that it's somehow they can sort of control what we get to remember. And a lot of other people have had similar experiences. But then it was like kind of like a movie screen, because the pictures just appear. But then I saw the earth from the moon, and it was like a silvery, glittery fishnet around the earth. And the reason I say that is because I grew up in Sweden, and I would row the boat from my grandmother when we laid the net in the ocean. And when she lifted those nets out early in the morning, the water on the fishnet would like shimmer in the sunlight. And so that's what it looked to me in 1990. This is now 1994. And there was no internet back then, right? So we didn't have access to the kind of images that we have today. And now I know people refer to it as the grid, right? And you can see pictures on the internet, and it looks just like that. And it wasn't until like 2013, 2014 that I realized, my daughter told me, oh my gosh, I told my daughter about this. And she's like, oh my God, those images are on the internet, mom. But I had done research in the libraries back in the 1990s, and there wasn't anything for me to find. So I thought I was crazy this whole time. But anyway, so he shows me that there is a silvery, glittery fishnet around the earth. And he says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that, I was sent back to earth. And so this is now 1994. And it was after these experiences, I started becoming clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient. And I started to hear things or see things before they would happen. And I would tell the family, and, just one thing led to another. But that is then what propelled me to change my whole life, because now I understood that you don't just die and go away forever. The way I exist now in my body is I'm having an earthly experience. When I pass, when my physical body dies, I basically step out and I'm still me, and I exist now in a different state. Right. And that is why we can communicate with the spirit world, right? Because we can communicate with those that have left us. So becoming more and more clairvoyant and clairaudient and clairsentient over the years. This is my short version of this. All this. Well, I became more clairvoyant and clairaudient, and then that led me to start hearing things and seeing things before they happen. And I was literally guided in 2004, which was 12 years. My daughter was not 12. And so it was 10 years and 12 years after my near-death experiences. I had spirit entities visit me, and they would tell me things all the time. People were sick, and I would call them, and you're gonna be in an accident, and then that happens. And it was just my normal life. So I had 12 years of just starting to see things and learn, and they would always come true. And I would tell my family, and they told me I had to go to medical school, and I had to become a doctor, a naturopathic doctor. I had to combine East and West. And that's kind of what naturopathic medicine is, but it's also the thinking of East and West and bringing that together. And then to bring messages and healing to the people, and to write 2 books, 3. So I've written my first book. So I went to medical school. I started my prereqs. I was enrolled in prereq medical school within a week of these messages in 2004. And literally 2 weeks later, I was in class. And because at that point, after 12 years of hearing and seeing things coming true, you're just like, oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah, you just learn to trust it. Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you mean writing a book? Like, what book? I've never thought of myself as being an author. Yeah. And the spirit guides were just like, we'll tell you when the time is right. Like right now, focus on becoming a doctor. And it was that, strong of a message. And I didn't understand. I said, well, what do you mean messages? Bring messages and healing to the people. And they're like, we'll tell you later. And then I went to med school in 2012, graduated in 2016, then did my residency until 2018, then opened up my own practice in January 2019 in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
And it was as soon as I graduated, literally, I had just taken my board exams. I didn't even have my license yet. And I meet this woman who says, and she's like, we met at a course, and she's like, I'm a medium and I have your mother with me. Are you open to receiving messages? And I said, sure. And I was just kind of laughing at it, because it's like, she's not going to know anything about me. I was raised in Europe. She couldn't even guess, right?
Yeah.
Well, of course, she was spot on. It was definitely my mother. Yeah. And she was like, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College to study mediumship. And so then I went to England to study mediumship, and then became a medium. And so now I understand what they meant when they said to bring messages to people, because that's how you refer to getting a message from the spirit world that you then give to the person you're doing a reading for. So bringing messages and healing to the people now finally makes sense.
Got it.
I got that message in 2004, and it wasn't until 2017 that all of a sudden I was at Arthur Findlay College, and they started saying, you're bringing a message. You're bringing a message to your client. You're bringing a message from the spirit world. And I was like, oh my gosh, there it is.
Yeah.
Like I never even understood where that was going to come in. And then I wrote my first book as soon as I graduated, which is called Med School After Menopause, The Journey on My Soul, which has all these crazy stories in them, but it's also to help people heal. But that thing of you're to write 2 books, no wait, 3, I have received that same message from 4 different mediums, 2 in the United States and 2 in England. And the message always comes through the same way. And they say, I have your mother with me. She tells me you're writing a book. And then they'll say, oh, wait, she's saying you're to write 2 books, no wait, 3. And that message is the exact same message I received in 2004. And I've gotten it from 4 different mediums. It delivered the exact same way each time.
So you're a medium, but you have other mediums.
Right. So when you go to Arthur Findlay College, for example, in England, which is a world-renowned college for psychic science, and those are like the best mediums in the world. The teachers there have been working as a professional medium for 25, 30 years. They do this every single day. They are absolutely phenomenal. And so when you go there, you work with the teachers, and you work with the other students that are coming from all over the world.
So you're getting messages with each other, practicing with each other.
Yeah. Okay. And the teachers. So that was the short version.
That's a lot, man. So yeah, like I've heard you tell this story, and I'm like, holy smokes, man. I didn't know about the log cabins. And so what would you say to skeptics who would say to you, well, I mean, you went to sleep one night and you had a near-death experience. Some of us would call that a dream. How do you know that wasn't a dream? How do you know that was a near-death experience?
Right. So exactly. I get that, because I thought I was crazy for many, many years. I was like, how do I know? I can't prove it. I wasn't in the ER. I don't know what my blood pressure was at. It was just the usual thing. Waking up, I get faint. I take my head off the pillow. I couldn't even keep my head on a pillow many nights, and off I went. Now, if you call it a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative event, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't really matter, because we all have spiritual experiences. And so what I'm trying to teach people is that you all have these experiences. And once you start talking about it, people say, oh yeah, I felt like my grandmother. My grandmother told me that, I could find my car keys over underneath the bureau, the cat, you know what I'm saying? People get messages all the time, but then they question them and said, oh, well, maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was just my imagination. So the thing of when you have an event like that, a near-death experience or spiritually transformative event, it doesn't matter what you call it in the end. But the only thing that matters is that you had some kind of a spiritual experience that then transformed your life.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
It's a good answer.
It doesn't matter what you call it.
No. And where do you think that urge comes from in people to explain it away?
Because we are human.
Yeah.
I was one of those people.
I know.
Until I was 28 years old. I was, actually, I was 34 when I had my first near-death experience. And I was one of those people that did not believe in anything. And I would have just laughed at somebody that would have told them. If I was somebody else, that told my old self, my story, I would have said, wow, that person is like crazy. I don't know, what an imagination, or they probably dreamt it. And I would completely explain it away, because that was my belief system then, right? Because you also, to a certain extent, create your own world based on your own belief system, right? So you see the world from your own experiences that you have had. And if you haven't had an experience like that, and you don't come from a religious background, you're not probably gonna take that for granted, saying,
it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense till it makes sense. I get that. That's good. So you talk about if it wasn't concrete and tangible, you didn't believe it. Suddenly you have this transformative experience. You become clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. Tell us, please, what those words mean real quickly, and then I have a question about that.
Okay. So clairvoyant means that you see things. Clairaudient means that you hear things. And clairsentient means that you're feeling things. Okay. So you're hearing, but it's not the way we're hearing right now. It is not the voice inside your head that's thinking, and it's not hearing with your ears. You're hearing it from somewhere else. It's kind of like omnipresent hearing.
I get what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's sometimes I have a, what do you call it? Claire something, where I just know something.
Oh yeah.
I just suddenly know
I can't think of the
which
word.
way to
Yes.
go. I know what you mean, but
Yes.
it's Claire something.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've heard or read about other people who've had near-death experiences where they have this transform experience where they visit the other side and then they come back and they really struggle for years to come to terms with the fact that they're in this seemingly finite world, and yet they know of this other side, this other presence, this other place, and struggle to bring the two things together. And in your whole belief system, your whole direction in life changed drastically. I know it took a long time for you to get to the med school bit and then to get to the school, but was there an adjustment period? Was this a hard thing for you, or was it just like, oh, okay, the world's different than I thought?
Oh, it's definitely a hard thing because everything is turned upside down for you.
Yeah.
And as I didn't have any beliefs that your soul could exist outside the body, I thought I was going crazy. I was scared of sharing my story with anybody.
Yeah.
And literally my mother-in-law saved me. She came to visit to help because I couldn't really do much. I basically slept for 2 months after that first near-death experience. So, and I told her what had happened and how I had left my body. And she said, oh, you had what's called a near-death experience. And so with her help, she gave me Raymond Moody's books and I would read those. There wasn't that much information on it. I mean, those books were written like in the 1970s and 80s, I think, but it's not like today when so many people have come forward with their stories and help all the other people, because this is something it's going to skyrocket the number of people that are going to have near-death experiences and then try to adjust that into their life with our modern technology of being able to revive people. So we're going to see a huge rise in people that have these experiences, and it's important for counselors to understand what happens. So it turns your whole world upside down because nothing is what it was. You now have a completely different viewpoint of how you exist in this universe.
It must feel very alone, right? You're just,
yeah,
it would
because
be
like
isolating.
nothing, nothing is the same, and you've turned all your beliefs inside out.
Yeah, and who do you talk to?
Exactly, and all your old friends probably don't believe the same thing you do or did, right? That's why they're your friends, because you get along with them, you sort of resonate with them, and now all of a sudden you have a whole different viewpoint. And so the changes can be so dramatic that the spouses don't even recognize their spouse anymore because they become such a different person. And there's very, very high divorce rate for people that have had near-death experiences because you change so much, and that other person is like, well, I don't know, you're not the person I married. You've changed a lot. Because your values, everything changes, the way you view everything.
You're opening up in a whole new way, and you're not relatable anymore to the old crowd.
Right.
And now I understand, like you alluded to, there's such a network of people who've experienced this, and such a support network, I would imagine, and even conferences. So isn't that nice?
Yeah, there's this huge organization. It's called IANDS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS.org. It's a world organization, and they do research all over the world. They have researchers in Belgium, the Netherlands, and England, and they're trying to prove by researching people's near-death experiences. And they just came out actually on Netflix with a new series called Surviving Death.
I've seen that.
Bruce Grayson is releasing his book called After, and it's near-death experience research. And I've been part of some of these research studies myself in the past. But, we've come to that point now when we're starting to be able to prove it. So
that's wild.
Yeah, it is wild.
So you said that the second near-death experience you had, you were there and you had this person on your left and this person on your right, and they were talking. And the one said, you asked a question, and he said, well, you're not going to remember this. I could tell you, but you won't remember the answer. What's your understanding of why we don't get to know, or why we don't get to remember
Because
all the things we want to know and remember. What's going on there?
Because we're here to have an earthly experience. We're not, if we knew everything that's going to happen, right? It's that it's our life, right?
Yeah.
We sort of incarnate. The way I look at it is we incarnate with an agenda.
Okay.
Right. And so I gave a talk at the big IONS conference last August, I think it was, and I had this sticky notepad, and I would say, it's kind of like you're up in heaven, and you're like, oh, let me write a note about that. Oh, I'll take that one. Oh yeah, and then I'll get divorced later on, and I'll take that note. And oh yeah, I'm gonna flunk in school, and I'm gonna do the wrong path. And then as you go through life, you're like, oh yeah, I solved that problem. Get that note off. Right. You go through the next problem, like you married the wrong person, you get a divorce, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get that off. I did that. It's not coming off. My note's not coming off. What's happening? And then you're like, oh, wait, I made the same mistake again. I married the same kind of personality. And then you marry the right person. So you're your fifth relationship, and you're like, okay, the note's coming off. Right. But it's kind of like that. You have certain tasks or contracts or whatever you want to call it, and things to experience. But then we live in a world where we get to choose what we do. Right. So I look at it like you come in covered in sticky notes, or you have like a little backpack. I talk about it in my book, a backpack full of sticky notes. And you go through life, and the more you resolve your problems, the more sticky notes you're throwing out. And your backpack gets lighter and lighter and lighter as you go through life, because you solve these problems that you incarnated to solve. But if you don't solve any of them, it's like, okay, I'm coming back in the next life with the same backpack because I didn't solve any of my problems.
Okay, that's interesting.
And you go through life and you're resolving these problems, because without resolving them, your soul wouldn't grow, because it really comes down to your soul growth. And the world is a very dense place to exist, right? It's very dense and compact, and we're sort of stuck in these little tiny bodies, because when you're outside your body, you have no weight. You're just like, zero.
Expansive.
You weigh zero. Yeah. It's just, you just exist in some other state, almost like a gas state. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you don't have a heavy body. You go back into your body, and it's just so dense and heavy and compact. And you're just kind of squished into this little
and your view is narrow, and
it's just like, and you only see one thing at a time, and you see it from your perspective. And this is how things are, because I'm relying on my own experiences, and this is how I perceive this problem. And it's not until you go through and you resolve problems, and then your soul grows, and you say, oh wow, I solved that problems. But what? I changed my perception. I changed the way I perceive the problem, because just like Einstein said, you can never solve a problem on the level on which it was created. And so you have to take that step, right? You have to kind of evolve your soul so that you can then find a resolution to that problem. And then now you're ready for your next sticky note, because you solved that one. And then you go on, and you keep evolving up and out. That's how I look at it.
That's interesting. I like the analogy. I like the sticky notes and the solving problems, and the changing your perspective is solving a problem, almost, is what I was hearing you say. Expanding your perspective and your view is how you come out the other side with growth. So I've heard different takes on, heaven and hell. There is no hell. There's only love, so, and yet the word evil keeps coming up. This person's evil, or that's evil. And I've at times been sort of like, well, I don't know if I believe in hell, so I don't know that I believe in evil. I just believe in distance from source love. How do you explain those concepts?
Why we have evil?
Well, what is there such a thing as evil, and what is it? And is there a hell? And just curious where you're coming from with all that.
I think that when you pass on, you don't go to hell. I think that everybody goes to the light in the end, right? But when you say, is there evil? Everything has an opposite, because we live in a dualistic world. So without the evil, you wouldn't know what good is. you have to have evil so you understand what gratitude and love is. Because without evil, you wouldn't have that understanding. So it's like that for everything that exists, is that you have an opposite. It's like the yin and yang of our own existence, because otherwise we can't see it or understand it. But I've heard of people that have near-death experiences that have a hellish-like experience. And so all near-death experiences aren't about the love and the light. There are people that have scary near-death experiences too. And you can read all about that on the IANS website. They have an astronomical amount of information that you could learn more about that. But when you pass on to the spirit world, if you ask anybody that is a medium, then they're going to tell you that I've never had anybody come visit you from hell, right? Because everybody comes from the spirit world and everybody's happy. It doesn't matter if they were a bad person when they lived here, because now they're in the spirit world, and people have what's called life reviews, and they get to, some people that have had near-death experiences have had life reviews, and they come back and they said, I felt the pain that I caused the other people, and it was not fun at all, and I saw how bad I had been and the influence I had, and it completely changed these people, and they came back, and now they became this most loving, kindest person because they saw that. And so I think that when you pass over, it's you get to see what you did wrong, and you might feel those experiences. And could that be hellish in itself? Yes, because you're feeling the pain you caused other people. And I think about that, all the time. I try to, even when I get mad, I'm like, no, always do the right thing. Like, always put your best foot forward. I'm not going to go to hell. I'm not going to go to heaven or pass over and then see all the pain I caused everybody else. So I always try to think of that, like, because life is really about love and gratitude and understanding where other people are coming from, and trying to put yourself in their shoes and try to see it from their perspective, because they're relying on their own life experiences to have the perception and experience that they're having right now.
That's good. So I think it's me just saying it in a different way. I hear what you're saying. It's like saying you're like heaven and hell could be in water on earth, two different places. Or you could say, I'm just saying distance from being in the water, out of the water, like it's the same
right.
same idea, to just different labels. And I hear what you're saying too about people who have unpleasant experiences in their near-death experience. It doesn't mean they're damned to hell forever. It just means that they're having unpleasant reviews or experiences, and maybe just be a farther distance from the source when they're
I always joke it, when people are afraid of that, being afraid of death is like the easy part. Dying itself does not hurt. What I'm saying? You might be in pain because you were in an accident or something, but dying or going to the other side or leaving your body, that's you just step out. It's like you stepped out of your car, you stepped out of the house. It doesn't hurt at all. And so nothing to be afraid of. The hellish part would be existing on earth, because life on earth, think about it. There isn't, everybody has problems. Even your neighbor that has the best car on the street and the biggest house on the street, that person or that woman still has a lot of problems. It's because you're just seeing it from the outside, and if you had all those things, you're thinking to yourself, I wouldn't have any problems, right? But everybody has problems. We didn't incarnate without problems. Everybody incarnated with trauma and problems to be resolved.
But I picture it almost like you chose to go to the amusement park, Earth, and you're on the roller coaster.
Right. Pretty much.
Right. And you're climbing up, and then you're down, and then you're climbing up, and this is the ride that you picked. And
exactly.
This is the fun of it, right? And like you say, you can't have the joy without the pain. That's why you have those two experiences, for the contrast. And so like it's all transient, and enjoy it,
Right.
It's a ride, man. It is a ride, right?
Even when you're going through those muddy valleys, as I call it, there's always sunshine waiting. You just got to keep walking. Eventually it's all like temporary, so it's all transient, and nothing lasts forever. That's what I tell my patients. Like, this is temporary. Like
Yeah.
things are going to get better. I know it's really bad right now. Believe
Yeah.
me, I've been in your boat, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't last forever. And there is a lesson. You're going to come out on the other side with a new gained perspective. And it might be life changing for some people, if
Yeah.
depending on what the hardships are. It so changes people's lives,
Yeah.
these very difficult things that we have to go through.
What a
But
great
they're
thing to hear right now in a
mhm,
global pandemic when people are suffering.
mhm. Yeah.
Some people are suffering, some are thriving, right? We're all in a
All
different
right.
spot.
Yeah.
So this is so fascinating. So you changed your life course. You went to the School of Naturopathic Medicine. You're a
Mhm.
practicing medium. You and I met,
Mhm.
interestingly, in an online course during a
Mhm.
pandemic, doing intergenerational family trauma. And
Mhm.
so here you are now practicing all these different. I mean, you've done some interesting postgraduate work, and you do combine science and intuition in the work that you do. And you're living your life's path, your soul's purpose, as you say. Tell me
Right.
about the average week in your work life. What do you do now with all of this?
Right. I know it's a good question.
Yeah.
Um, so I split my time. I work as a physician half the time, or 2.5 or 3 days a week. And then I work as a medium and medical intuitive and ancestral healer another 2 or 3 days a week. And it just sort of varies. So some weeks I'll do 2 days of that and 3 days of the other, or the next week I'll reverse it. It just depends where I'm needed for that week. One week there might be more patients, the next week it might be more spiritual work. And sometimes they sort of cross over too, because sometimes you see somebody who needs more spiritual work in order to heal, and
Yes.
sometimes somebody who has spiritual work and think that they can heal everything spiritually, but they actually need real medicine to heal them too.
Yeah.
Because there is often not one or the other, because once something has manifested physically and now you have a physical problem, right? You
Yes.
have like you have bad digestion, and you have diarrhea every day, and there's things going on. I'm not just going to spiritually heal you, because it's manifested physically, so we kind of have to work on it physically and then also spiritually, right? And that's my big goal, is try to help people find that balance, because we don't heal if we just go to the doctor and they say, well, here's a proton pump inhibitor, or take some Tums. That's not going to heal you. It's not going to fix your problem. So you have to look at what it is that's causing that. Or maybe you have food allergies, or maybe you have like a digestive disease, or maybe you just don't have enough stomach acid to digest, or not enough enzymes, or who knows what it is, a sluggish liver, right? Could be gazillion things.
Yeah.
And you have to work on that to help the body and the organs heal whatever it is that's not working. But then there might also be a spiritual component to that if you heal the spiritual component and heal the physical, the person will actually heal, versus somebody who just takes a medication for the rest of their life. Because we tend to forget that the pharmaceutical industry is a business. They need to make a profit. And so how are they going to make a profit? They're going to try and get you on a medication that you have to take for the rest of your life, because that's going to bring a huge profit to that company. So that is also because everybody's in bed with everybody else, because that's the economy of it all. And so the pharmaceutical companies then support the medical associations, and so that they will give these different pharmaceuticals, right?
For sure,
And
yeah.
so it's not always the way you can heal someone. Of course, medications are sometimes needed, and it is the best way for that person to exist, because maybe they can't exist without that medication. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then that's what you have to do. But people that also think that they can heal spiritually, when in fact they do need a pharmaceutical medication, and that is how you're going to heal and go on with your life, so you can resolve all the other sticky notes that you carry in your backpack. And that is the best solution for these people. But we tend to have camps of people where people who are spiritual think that they can heal everything with celery juice, or whatever the latest fad is that they read from some medium online, or some fad, or there's something. And when the truth is that actually that person might be better off doing a medication or actually doing chemotherapy for cancer, because that is how they're going to survive. But then you have these people, they think they can heal themselves, but in fact, that's not the path you signed up for. You signed up for this path where you're going to get this disease, then you're going to do chemotherapy, and that's going to save your life, and then you're going to go on and do these things. That was what you signed up for. But this other person over here signed up for spiritual healing, and they're going to succeed. And then we have, person 3 who signed up for a combination of all of the above, right? But that we tend to forget that when people think that there's just one way to do it, but you have to figure out what the right way for you is.
Yeah. And it can be a combination.
Everybody has their own path and their own lessons to learn. And sometimes that involves ancestral healing, right?
I like what you're saying, though, the idea that if something has manifested physically, let's deal with that.
Yeah.
And let's get to where did this start, or where did this come from too, if we need to go there. It makes such good sense to me, and that's one of the questions we had in the course. So can't erectile dysfunction be low testosterone? Like, does it really have to be an intergenerational trauma issue? Yes. And yes, like, both.
And it could just be circulation. Many times it's just circulation.
Yeah.
And actually, if they just improve circulation, the erectile dysfunction goes away, and they might actually have normal testosterone. But here we go, because we're fed this information.
Yeah.
And so, it's low testosterone. You should get testosterone. Pharmaceutical company steps gives it testosterone. So, but many times it's actually circulation and diet. And if you can have, that person lose weight, maybe they're overweight, get some exercise going, get the circulation going, nice hot and cold showers, all of a sudden everything works again.
Yeah. Or maybe it's emotional.
You didn't do anything except, exactly. Or it could be ancestral healing. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But the problem is to figure out what's right for each person.
Yeah. What a gift it is that you have all of that. You don't subscribe to one camp or another. You actually can offer all of this, including relating to people who've had near-death experiences, because they can feel very isolated and alone, as we said. Like they, they're afraid to be called crazy or menopausal or whatever,
yes. And they tend to get very sensitive. So people who have had near-death experiences, there are many stories about this and how they don't tolerate pharmaceutical drugs anymore. And they get very sensitive, and literally you have to give them a child's dose, like a dose you would give to like an 8-year-old. And this is a full grown male in his 50s, because he doesn't tolerate the higher doses anymore. Something happens to these people and they get really, really sensitive. And it happened to me too. I was every reaction, if there was 1 in 25,000 that would get a rash from this one drug, guess what? I would get the rash. And it was just constant like this. And so I had to find other ways to heal myself when I was sick and going through my and I didn't know anything about it back then, because I was just relying on my own intuition. And I had just studied nutrition back in 1988. I studied nutrition, so I obviously prepped myself for this to happen in 1992.
So you are going to write 2 3 books, as you said, and you've written 1 so far. Do you know yet? Has it been revealed to you what the second book is?
It is. I know it is a more spiritual book, because I knew that this first book, that's called Med School After Menopause: The Journey of My Soul, is a book about my events and my life, but each chapter has a message at the end and a little exercise, because what I'm really trying to do is help other people transform their life, become more spiritual, become more clairvoyant. And so I tell them stories of what happened for me and how it, came to be for me, and all these different stories throughout the book. And then try to help people find that within themselves, because we are intuitive creatures. We are human beings living in this universe. We all have a sixth sense. We all know, walking into a room and everybody's mad, you're going to feel it. Nobody has to say anything. You know that everybody's mad, right? And we have these capabilities, but we've sort of turned them off and we haven't developed them. And I think, back in the day, we were way more intuitive, but now people are relying on technology. Everything is technology. People look at their phones all the time. We have become a very disconnected society in itself. And we are disconnected to our own families, to our own ancestors. That then causes problems in itself, because we have more and more people that are feeling isolated, and now we're going through a pandemic too. But it's bringing people back together and creating actually smaller communities instead of global communities where people know each other and live together, work together. How many of your neighbors do you know? Do you know every neighbor on your street? Do you know them by name?
Almost now, because of pandemic.
The pandemic, right?
Everybody's home
people,
now.
I'm gonna say, well, I know, my two neighbors right next to me, and that's it. They don't know anybody else.
It's this last year has changed things for sure. Yeah. But to your point, we smaller communities because we don't know the people around us.
Yeah, and we've kind of been, become more and more disconnected.
Yeah.
To life and to who we are and where we come from, and we have these intuitive abilities that we're not using.
We just don't get quiet enough to listen, do we?
I just exactly, because it's all about fine-tuning those other senses that we have that we don't use. But we don't slow down. We're busy all the time, and it's part of our society is to look busy. So if you go, when we went to restaurants, which will come back soon, when you go to a restaurant and people are eating by themselves, they're just staring at their phone, while they're eating. The whole time they're just looking at their phone, because you have to be busy. It's our society being busy. And some people will say, well, I'm reading my emails or I'm reading an article, but you're also disconnecting from everything around you when you do that, instead of, okay, I'm going to eat my lunch and I'm going to look around and see these other people. Maybe the person next to me is sitting by themselves too and would like to have a conversation, but we don't do that. We don't pay attention to listening to the birds. We just sort of emerge into our little bubble, and we kind of isolate ourselves that way. And so it's going to be interesting. And I see it with a lot of the younger population, anybody under 30. This is just what I've noticed working as a doctor for 4 years. But any patient under 30 grew up with technology and cell phones and all that, and they don't like to make phone calls because you have anxiety. Anxiety about what? Tell me something you have anxiety about. Making phone calls. That causes anxiety. They have to be on the phone talking to someone, opening the door or having conversations with people, because these. When I was a kid, we fought who was going to open the door, who was going to get to answer the phone first. That was a race to the phone to answer it, because everybody wanted to answer it. Me and 3 brothers.
I remember that
racing,
too, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the doorbell's ringing. Who could it be? And you got 4 kids storming
and
the door,
dog.
trying to get there first. And now it's the doorbell's ringing.
We're under attack.
God, who is it? Hide, right? And it's just it's such a different world. What have we done to our society? We created all these kids that have anxiety about making phone calls. Now, I'm not saying everybody has anxiety, but it is a common problem.
It is. It's right? Pervasive.
And
it is.
I think it comes from that, and kids have been kept inside more. Kids aren't playing on the streets. When I was a kid, it's be home by dark. And we were out playing in the woods and other neighborhoods for hours. And then we'd show up, we had a watch, and you better be home by 6, because that's, when you're supposed to be home.
Yeah.
And nobody knew where you were. And now it's you can't even have your, depending on where you live. If you live in Los Angeles, crowded places, you can't have your little kids play on the front of the house. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
Right?
Managed care all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a very different society that they've been raised in.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So your book, we'll put the link to your book, which anybody can buy anywhere in the world, as you say, because they can download the Kindle version or the electronic version of it.
It's on Amazon, but if there are listeners in other countries, it goes out to other platforms. It's on Barnes & Noble and other platforms around the world. So
awesome. And you also have a podcast, Science with Soul. And I'll put the link to your podcast on, we'll put the Apple link on anyway, and your website, et cetera, in the show notes. Sound good?
Sounds
Is there
great.
anything that you're doing right now that you'd like to promote before we sign off? This episode will be out in March.
In March, I think that it's about the time this spring. There is another book coming out that's called We Touched Heaven.
Okay.
And I'm a contributing author in that book. And there is a lot of very famous people that have contributed to this book and given short stories about their different experiences. So it's going to be a great book. I'm really excited. I'm really honored to be part of that project, to bring these fabulous, incredible events compacted in one book. So
that's so cool. Yeah. So will people be able to find that book on your website then?
Yeah, I'll be putting that up on my website as soon as it comes out. So
awesome.
I know they're putting the final touches on it right now. So it's getting close.
That's
very
great.
Exciting.
That's it. That is really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. And thank you so much for sharing. You shared a ton on this in this hour. So thank you very, very much for all of that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, take care.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Friends, thanks for listening. And if you liked this episode, please be sure to click on the thumbs up below for YouTube and comment. What did you like most? And what do you want to hear more of? I'd love to hear from you. And in case you missed it, the website is maureentowns.com. Bye.